Oh, hello there. Welcome to my Zen chamber of hope and intrigue. Today I want to talk a little bit about one of the most basic teachings or principles in Zen Buddhism, which is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. What are we all doing here? What are we doing on the cushion? What are we doing as people who practice Buddhism and meditation and Zen? Sometimes we lose the plot as practitioners. We're going through our lives and maybe phoning it in, or not completely present. And then there's some kind of big event, usually almost always definitely a negative event, and we're back in the crux of practice. This actually happened to me yesterday. I'm at my girlfriend's and she's not in town. I hear a banging on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning. And there's some guy out there hollering in German. I'm like, this doesn't sound good. This doesn't end well. And finally I open the door after throwing my pants, and he's like yelling at me again in German. Turns out he's from the Hausverwaltung, which is the house manager. So he's like, look, dude, and he points to the wooden floor, and there's like 1.5 inches, 2 inches of water. So it turns out what had happened was I had shut the door on the dishwasher last night, heard the pleasant rumble of modern technology cleaning my dishes without me having to do a thing, and I went to bed. Well, it turns out there's water spraying out of the broken machine. But even worse, it went through the ceiling and down into the neighbor and was spilling out through the lights, like the electric lights, spilling out of vents and stuff. So the upshot is there may be a very big bill incoming. And I remember, so yesterday I was sitting there looking, we're getting to the Four Noble Truths. I was sitting there looking at the water, and I was thinking, how do you clean up? How the hell do I clean this up, right? And then, as sometimes happens during these moments, I started thinking about some kid in Ukraine whose house is bombed, or some family in Gaza who goes out for groceries and comes back and their entire city block is in ruins, right? It's weird. Sometimes when I have my smaller tragedies, my heart just, the doors get flung open for the bigger tragedies in life. Like medical emergencies. So after I get this whole situation taken care of with the water, turns out I was so in a state of sleepy shock, I didn't realize, you just get a wet, dry vac and you vacuum the water. So the guy from the Hausverwaltung that came here did that. So, we just finished cleaning that up, and I get a call from my friend down the street, my Zen friend, and he says, hey, can you come over here? I'm having a heart attack, and I need you to be here in case I die before the paramedics arrive. It's not exactly what he said, but that's the feeling that I got. I was like, what? What? So I go over to his house, and the wonderful, young, bright, spry Austrian paramedics come. The youth here have a really nice, clean, I don't know, they're doing something right with the kids here. And so there were 3 of these kids, and they were the kids, and I'm looking at these kids, and I'm looking at my Zen friend. I've known him for a long time, and I knew him when he was a spry young man in his prime, and he used to work out, and he was very fit, and he had his shaved head because he's a Zen monk, and he's like a beautiful, green-eyed young stud. And I'm looking at him now, and now that there's a beautiful, green-eyed young stud who's taking his blood pressure and is like telling him what to do, and is kind of like treating him a bit like an older dude that he needs, having a medical situation that he needs to manage. And again, I started thinking about core foundational Buddhist practices. So those core Buddhist teachings and practices, they're with us when everything is going groovily and we're not really paying attention to our practice so much, and we're riding a good wave of karma and luck. And then they're with us when we hit the brick wall, right? When the fit hits the Shan, right? And then I find it's helpful to return to the basics. And the most basic core Buddhist teachings are the Four Noble Truths. So let's unpack and look at these Four Noble Truths a little bit. So oftentimes, when I teach to a classroom of students or just people who are asking me about the Four Noble Truths, when I talk about the first noble truth, I put it like this: life as we know it is not how any of us would have designed it. Like if we were God, if there's a God, if we were God and God was like, I'm going to design life. Like, why don't I make it where we have these beings with highly developed nervous systems that have reached a tipping point where those nervous systems are sensitive to themselves, which gives rise to something called self-consciousness. Wow, that's going to be really cool. It's going to be a thing that knows it's a thing and that has feelings as a thing. Oh, I got it. Let's throw all these things with varying degrees of highly sensitive nervous systems together and then make them have to eat each other. As Joseph Campbell said, a fundamental truth about the human condition, the condition of being on planet Earth: life eats life. It's really not how I would have designed it. You know, I would have said, let's make grass have one overwhelming aim, mission, and desire: to be eaten by cows, to be turned into cud. Like every blade of grass pushes itself up, and it has a, you know, grass is not totally sentient, but there's some life happening. There's green life. It's pushing up towards the sun. It's pulling the sun in and it's eating the sun. And you know, it just craves to become cud, right? And then cows. What about cows? Well, cows are eating the grass and they're loving their life. But there's just one problem. They have these heavy T-bone steaks and cheese and burgers growing on their backs. But lo and behold, this wonderful species called human beings comes along and peels these steaks off their backs and peels these burger patties off their backs. And the cows are like, oh, thank you. This is kind of how I would have designed life, right? Life is messy. It's a problem. It presents to us continual problems that there are no easy solutions and no easy answers to. But what I like about Buddhism, it says, hey, yes, it affirms this fact. It acknowledges it. It helps us look at the whole, helps me look at the whole situation together and gives me peace for a moment from the continual process of fighting my individual problems, each one at a time, and helps me look at the whole picture. And it affirms, relax, okay? There's something off about the situation, suffering, and suffering is caused by craving. So let's talk a little bit about tanha, or craving. So real quickly, the second noble truth, tanha, craving, desire, roughly translates for me as the teaching that the reason that we suffer in a certain way is because we crave a different reality. So again, the first noble truth is like, here's the reality. And then the second noble truth says, you're suffering because or suffering arises at the same time or codependently with this craving for life to be different or other than it is in the moment. Another way to look at this is we've created a separation between us and a situation. And the implication then is suffering dissolves when you're one with the situation, or you're one with the moment, or you're my teacher used to call it making relationship. Making relationship with reality or truth or the problem. I open the front door. I got a guy screaming German in my face. I take a few steps back and I'm in the living room area and there's inches of water on the floor. And I start crying in my beer. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, and my mind is triggered, and my amygdala is triggered, my prefrontal cortex going crazy, and I'm upset. Now I've been overtaken. The demons of my own particular character reach up and pull me down into their fires. This is hell. I was in hell. I'm looking at the water like, how am I going to deal with this? And it hurts and it's scary. I'm not making a relationship with the situation. It can be very hard to make relationship with the situation. It can be very hard to deal with or work with a craving for reality to be different. So nowhere in Buddhism is it written that this is easy to do, that we're just stupid, that we need to just snap out of it, right? That is not my experience, okay? Which brings us to the third noble truth. So the third noble truth roughly translates as ending or like confinement. And I always think about this as meaning working with, like working with. So there's suffering is caused by craving, yet we can work with or contain or end this suffering. So I gave a talk once where I unpacked the first noble truth, there is suffering. And I didn't get to the other three noble truths. And someone came up to me afterward and they said, well, you know, Buddhism does say that suffering can be ended. I wonder if that is really what's taught in Buddhism. And I would even be so confident as to proclaim that in Zen, I don't think I ever got a teaching from anyone I respected that you can walk through this life floating on a cloud of titties, completely and totally free of suffering. For me, the third noble truth is different than that. And I think if one approaches the third noble truth from this idea that Buddhism teaches suffering can just end, I think that creates craving. It doubles you back to the second noble truth. You're craving an end to your suffering. Do you understand? Like, you can crave, you can end up in a kind of vicious circle through your spiritual practice. And the spiritual practice is supposed to help you navigate through your life, can send you up your patootie even more deeply, so far that like people can see your own eyeballs peering out your nostrils. I've had moments like that with spiritual people, and I thought, you would have been better never finding this practice, right? So we have to be careful. So again, for me, that word nirodha translates into you're able to work with suffering. And this is a lifelong project. I mean, I used to watch my Zen teacher at the age of 105 have to get up and face his day. And it was hard. You can't imagine how much pain is possible for a 105-year-old body. Like, he had no butt. So if he sat down, it was like right on the nerves, right on his sciatica nerves, right? And he had aspiration pneumonia, so he couldn't swallow very well. So he was skin and bones because food could not be digested. He had a hole in his side and a tube coming out where we poured formula for him. And what I saw was a man every day and this to me is what it means to be a Zen master. Fresh. He was fresh, freshly facing the day's challenges, and there was an energy to it. He was working with suffering, and oftentimes he was very curious about it, and curious about the pain, and curious about the human condition, wherein this sensitive creature feels pain, and you know, I wouldn't presume to get in another man's head, especially not my Zen teacher, when it comes to suffering, but it always seemed to me that he was good at working with what was in front of him, making relationship with it, whether it was pain in his body or his own terrible, stupid mistakes in life coming back to kick him in the butt. And in the end, I've done other videos about that. So whether it's pain on the inside or pain on the outside, watching him work with the situation honestly and wholeheartedly, that to me is the third noble truth. So don't think that this is a teaching of suffering's going to end if you do this practice right. I feel like it's more realistic than that. It's a more earthy teaching than that, and it's a lifesaver. It's been a lifesaver for me to grasp how this third noble truth means that my life, my practice is a work in progress. And every day, in every moment, with every situation, I have to keep re-manifesting my working with suffering, working with the bad moments, working with boredom, a bus that's too hot, noisy, and crowded, working with a sudden palpitation in the heart. Holy bananas, this is it, I'm gonna die, this is a different situation. I can't practice Zen now. I mean, the teaching is no matter what the situation is, from a hangnail to a heart attack, the practice is the same. You're making relationship with reality and the world as it is. The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. I'm not going to go into this too much because I don't like lists, but the Eightfold Path is basically how you're going to take those previous three teachings and manifest them in the world. Manifest present moment awareness, or sati in Sanskrit. Manifest making relationship with whatever is in front of you in the moment, whether it's unpleasant or pleasant, okay? So the Eightfold Path is, you could say it's called right effort, right view, right intention, right livelihood, right speech, right concentration, right action, and right meditation. I remembered the list even though there's a thing in my brain that doesn't like lists. So right, or you could say complete attention, complete meditation, a complete livelihood. I mean, there's different ways of parsing the Eightfold Path. I always look at it as kind of a call to go out into the world and put Buddhism or Zen into practice, manifest it. So in sum, Buddhism addresses the problem of the human condition, and it addresses the spiritual impulse that's natural and indigenous to the human being and one's condition, and that is, what is going on? And why does it oftentimes seem so crazy and painful? I think about my friend. He was sitting on his couch yesterday as the paramedics were checking his blood pressure and his heartbeat, and his mom died very recently, and his sister-in-law died very recently, and he's just had a lot of deaths in the family, and was looking at him sitting on the couch, and I was thinking about how short and fragile and conditional our lives and our bodies are and our minds are, and yet how deep and sensitive and fathomless we are. I mean, sometimes it feels like the human being's ability to feel pain and suffering and depths of beauty and love and insight runs so deep. It seems unfathomable that we just die and disappear into blackness or nothingness, and this whole cosmos just kind of keeps generating itself for no reason at all. There's something in the fact that we're put on this planet and we're not at ease all the time. It's almost as though we're here to learn something. It's almost as though we're here to grow And I know, sometimes I really want something to be a certain way in life. I have craving. And if I cling to that want, if I cling to the idea of myself, an idea I have about myself or my life, I suffer. But I've noticed that sometimes, the third noble truth, I can work with the suffering through the fourth noble truth, this eightfold path. I can work with reality, with a painful problem or situation. And then there's a shift. And I live for these shifts. I live for this blanking, this dissolving or blanking out of my limited, conditional, worn out, overly structured, overly thoughtful, and kind of stinky self. It dissolves, and like a bigger picture arises, and it contains suffering, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's like an opening. It's like these openings, right? And you feel the love of the universe, and you feel the wisdom of the universe. And yes, that may be anthropomorphizing everything, but I'm a human. I'm going to anthro, baby. Anthro's going to anthro, right? So perhaps today we've used the Four Noble Truths to ultimately come to a moment where putting these truths into practice, we're made bigger than ourselves. And you can call it anything you want. You can call it growth, you can call it grace, you can call it Kensho Satori, insight, openings. But it's a way of living that directly engages with your life and the planet and the world as it is. That's what has been one of the great benefits of Buddhist practice for me. Whew. I'm gonna drink some coffee because I didn't get much sleep last night. Listen, if you would like to support this channel, you can. You can go to patreon.com/ShozanJackHobner at this link right here. That's a great way to support this channel and help me keep making these videos for you here, which I do for free, but I really appreciate the support that you offer me. You can also, in the link below, there's a PayPal, in the video description there's a PayPal donation. You can go there to support this channel too. Otherwise, dear friends, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.